Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News program broadcasting to you live from the capital, Algiers. Up next are tonight's top stories. In Gaza, the Zionist siege is tightening its grip. No food, no water. Over 100 Palestinians have been killed in recent attacks. And just last month alone, 185 were killed by starvation. Also in news in Europe, courts are shedding light on Morocco's tracking of opponents abroad. The Rif Party hails a German ruling and urges broader condemnation as anger mounts over Moroccan ports being used to arm the Zionist entity. Coming up next, in Sudan, a landslide has killed more than 1,000 people. And in Al-Fashir, an RSF bombing leaves 18 dead and over 100 injured, prompting the African Union to call for urgent aid access. And later on, Putin says a security deal with Kiev is possible, insisting Russia doesn't seek war but rejects Ukraine joining NATO. Meanwhile, NATO warns of a growing Russian threat. The details are straight ahead. Welcome back. The Zionist entity has intensified its assault on Gaza, wiping out families and flattening homes with people still inside. Medical sources say at least 56 were killed in Gaza City after strikes hit a food center and a shelter for the displaced. In Ad-Daraj, 11 members of one family died as the city braces for ground invasion and forced evacuations. Further south, 24 more people were killed, including 7 children. In Khan Younis, an airstrike on tents sheltering displaced families left 21 dead, while shelling in Deir al-Balah killed 3 and wounded several others. Dozens of starving Palestinians were killed and wounded as the Zionist occupation opened fire on 8 distribution centers across the besieged Gaza Strip. Medical teams say at least 13 were martyred near the Wadi Gaza bridge in central Gaza, according to Al-Hawda Hospital. In the south, another 10 people were killed in Rafah and Khan Younis while waiting for food aid. Meanwhile, Gaza's health ministry says 13 Palestinians, 3 of them children, have died from starvation in the past 24 hours. The overall toll from hunger and lack of treatment has climbed to 361, including 130 children. Since the UN declared famine in Gaza, 83 people have died, among them 15 children. The war of starvation in Gaza claimed 185 lives in August as the Strip reels under sealed crossings and blocked aid, deepening the famine's toll. The health ministry says that since the UN declared famine on August 22, at least 70 more people, including 12 children, have died from hunger and lack of treatment. A worsening health crisis is gripping Gaza, where Palestinians are dying every day from hunger-related illnesses. Hospitals, already stretched by bombings and mass casualties, are now fighting the spread of disease fueled by severe malnutrition and collapsing sanitation. The story with Zahra Farjani.
A crowded waiting room filled to the brim. Children with pale faces and tired expressions, some of them crying. They are suffering from flu-like symptoms, coughing, vomiting, and fever. On the surface, these might seem minor, even ordinary, but in Gaza, they can quickly turn deadly. With no proper medical care and children already weakened by severe malnutrition, their immune systems simply can't cope.
He has a weak chest, a high fever, and a terrible cough. All of his brothers and sisters are the same. It's because of the harsh conditions, the environment, and the lack of nutrition.
Parasites are spreading everywhere, causing diarrhea, vomiting, and gastroenteritis. The flu has also spread in a frightening way. Children urgently need medicine and food. Their health is fragile, and they have no immunity.
This virus makes a lot of crowdedness in the hospital. The cases are admitted in the corridor, on the mattresses, on the floor. Sometimes the doctors in the reception room are obligated not to admit the cases because the overcrowdedness in the pediatric department.
Doctors here are also seeing other contagious illnesses, skin infections, viral neurological syndromes and more. The rise in infectious diseases is tied to collapse in hygiene, contaminated water, and the lack of sanitation in overcrowded camps.
I think that we have also a lot of cases that belongs to skin infection like impetigo and folliculitis and abscesses. And also we discovered a lot of cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome, of acute flaccid paralysis due to contamination of water that the patient are drinking, and it is contaminated by the sewage system. Also we have discovered a lot of cases that belongs to meningitis also in the last 3 months, and this belongs to overcrowdedness and to malnutrition and lack of vitamins.
And despite announcements of a so-called partial easing of the blockade, only tiny amounts of medicine have made it into Gaza, far too little to meet the need. On August 29th, the World Health Organization warned it had completely run out of viral medical supplies needed to treat the rising number of children in Gaza suffering from a rare paralysis syndrome. For Gaza's youngest, every day without medicine and food is a battle for survival.
Elsewhere in occupied Palestine, dozens of Zionist settlers escorted by heavy security stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque through the Maghariba Gate, performing rituals and staging provocative tours in its courtyards. At the same time, Zionist occupation forces raided the town of Inata, demolishing homes and made several arrests in Salwan, south of Al-Aqsa. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank are grappling with a deepening humanitarian water crisis as villages in the Jordan Valley face drought and settlers step up attacks on scarce supplies. At the same time, the occupation is draining groundwater reserves to feed new settlement expansion. Zarfarjani again.
Under the watch of a heavily armed Zionist soldier, a group of settlers attacks a water pipeline. Sadly, this isn't an isolated incident. Such assaults are common across the West Bank. Their aim is simple: cut off villagers from drinking water, pressure them to leave, and take over their land. Palestinians are left with few options. They travel long distances to collect water or pay high prices for truck deliveries just to survive the ongoing crisis.
They break the pipelines over and over again. We've repaired them many times, but they also destroy the pressure valve and the handle that controls the flow.
We don't have water because of these settler attacks. They cut off the supply to Kafr Malik, which is the main source of water for the West Bank. That is why we had to come here to get what we need.
It is a grueling situation for Palestinians in the West Bank, especially villagers watching their water resources dry up. Irrigation becomes impossible. Farmland turns barren, crops wither, and livestock are left to die of thirst.
If the settlers keep attacking, we'll face a water conflict worse than the one over occupation itself. This isn't about cutting water supplies. It's also about security, about economics, and part of a systematic plan to drive people out.
Water shortages have been a daily reality for Palestinians for years. Across the West Bank, rooftop tanks are a necessity, storing rainwater or expensive trucked-in water because the network is so unreliable. Now settler attacks have made things even worse, and it's not just villagers that are struggling. Even major cities like Ramallah face growing shortages, forcing residents to rely on public taps.
Belgium's Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost says his country will officially recognize the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly. He also announced 12 sanctions against occupying Israel and backed the New York Declaration, calling the move a response to the humanitarian disaster in Gaza Strip and ongoing violations of international law. Britain's Foreign Secretary David Lammy told Parliament the famine in Gaza is man-made, blaming systematic starvation by the Israeli occupation. He urged swift humanitarian action, warning the crisis will only deepen without immediate steps to stop it.
132,000 children under the age of 5 are at risk. More than 132,000 children under the age of 5 are at risk of dying from hunger by June of next year. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not a natural disaster, it's a man-made famine in the 21st century. And I'm outraged by the Israeli government's refusal to allow in sufficient aid. We need a massive humanitarian response to prevent more deaths. Crucial NGOs, humanitarians and health workers allowed to operate and stockpiles of aid on Gaza's borders released.
Elsewhere in the Middle East, Yemen's Houthis say they've launched 5 operations against the Zionist entity in occupied Palestine and the Red Sea. Spokesman Yahya Sarriah announced drone strikes on the Army's General Staff building, a power station in Hadira, Lod Airport and Asdod Port, along with an attack on a commercial ship in the northern Red Sea using drones and a cruise missile.
نفذ سلاح الجو المسير.
The Yemeni Armed Forces Drone Air Force carried out 4 military operations using 4 drones. The first operation targeted the Israeli enemy's General Staff building and the occupied city of Jaffa with the Samad 4 drone. The other operations targeted the Hadira power station and Lod Airport in Jaffa. The other operations targeted the Hadira power station, Lod Airport in Jaffa and Ashdod port in the occupied Palestine, all of which successfully hit their targets by the grace of God. As part of reaffirming the ongoing blockade of Israeli enemy maritime navigation in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea, the Drone Air Force and the Missile Force carried out a joint military operation against the vessel MSC Abi in the northern Red Sea. The ship was targeted after violating the blockade and engaging in direct links with the Israeli enemy. The operation was executed with 2 drones and a cruise missile, successfully striking its target.
To other regional news, a German court has jailed Moroccan citizen Youssef al-Asrouti for spying on reef activists in Europe on behalf of Morocco's intelligence services. The case exposed tactics of blackmail, bribery and spyware to track opponents abroad. The Reef National Party welcomed the Düsseldorf ruling, saying such practices target reef activists and violate human rights as well as European sovereignty. Meanwhile, the Makhzen regime is under mounting criticism for allowing Moroccan ports to supply the Zionist entity with weapons, despite daily protests over its role in the Gaza genocide. Activists with the BDS movement say 2 Maersk cargo ships docked at Tangier met on Sunday, carrying U.S. military equipment bound for the Zionist occupation forces in occupied Palestine. In response, in Tangier, thousands of protesters marched from Monday night into Tuesday, denouncing Morocco's normalization with the Zionist entity. Demonstrators called for an end to all ties, rejected what they described as a Zionist incursion into the country, and blasted their government's silence over the massacres in Gaza. In Libya, the UN mission urged all parties in Tripoli to hold escalating tensions and military mobilization, warning renewed clashes could endanger civilians. It called for continued dialogue under the Presidential Council's supervision, stressing the need to prioritize the safety of residents in the capital.
UN support mission in Libya acknowledges that negotiations under the Presidential Council supervision are ongoing and urges all parties to continue engaging in good faith to resolve remaining issues in the best interests of Tripoli's civilians, who must be protected. The mission urgently calls on all sides to hold all forms of escalation and immediately refrain from actions that could endanger civilians. Civilian lives and infrastructure must be safeguarded under all circumstances. Every human life is precious. Any renewed conflict would not only threaten Tripoli's security but could also spread to other regions of the country, leading to a war where everyone loses and civilians face grave risks.
Elsewhere in Africa, a massive landslide struck Darfur on Tuesday, completely burying the village of Tarsin and killing more than 1,000 people. Sudanese media say the disaster wiped out the entire population, making it one of the deadliest catastrophes in the region's history. The African Union has urged Sudanese parties to silence the weapons and allow aid to reach victims of the deadly landslide in North Darfur that killed more than 1,000 people. In a statement on Tuesday, the AU expressed solidarity with the victims and called on all stakeholders to ensure the swift delivery of emergency assistance.
The chairperson of the Commission expresses his sincere condolences to the families of the victims and his deepest sympathy to the people of Sudan affected by this tragedy. His thoughts also go out to the sole survivor whose resilience inspires respect and hope. In these dire circumstances, the chairperson of the Commission reiterates the African Union's unwavering solidarity with the affected populations and calls on all Sudanese parties to cease fire and join forces to facilitate the rapid and effective provision of emergency humanitarian assistance to those in need.
In North Darfur, at least 18 people were killed and more than 100 wounded after the Rapid Support Forces shelled neighborhoods in Al-Fashir. The Sudanese Doctors Network condemned the attack as part of a year-long pattern of war crimes, blaming the international community for failing to protect over 500,000 residents trapped under daily bombardments and starvation. To other news, Russia says its troops have seized a town in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region, while NATO warns of a growing GPS jamming it blames on Moscow. President Zelensky is sounding the alarm over fresh Russian troop buildups along the front line, fearing further escalation. Yasin reports now.
Russia says its troops have taken the town of Fydorovka in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region after what it called decisive battles. Moscow also claims it struck port facilities allegedly used by Ukrainian forces. The announcement came as Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky warned of fresh Russian troop buildups along the front line. He fears this could be the prelude to an even bigger escalation.
And now we see another build-up of Russian forces in certain sectors of the front. Only he refuses in any way to be forced into peace. Russia continues to launch strikes. Of course, we will respond to this, respond asymmetrically, in particular, so that Russia clearly feels the consequences of its presence. And we continue to work with partners to increase pressure on Russia, and this will happen. Russia hears nothing but force.
Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin was busy hosting Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico in Moscow. The Russian leader insisted that any security deal for Ukraine must not undermine Russia's security. He brushed off Western warnings of a possible Russian attack on Europe, calling them either provocations or sheer incompetence. He added that while Moscow does not oppose Ukraine's potential membership in the European Union, it firmly rejects Kyiv's entry into NATO.
It is natural for Ukraine to decide how to ensure its security, but this security must comply with the fundamental documents governing international relations and security on the European continent. However, such security cannot be achieved at the expense of the security of other countries, particularly Russia. For its part, Russia finds itself compelled to defend its own interests and those of the people with whom it is historically, culturally, and faithfully connected. This is the essence of the conflict. It doesn't represent aggressive behavior on our part, but rather on the other side. Our sole objective is to defend our interests.
Similarly, Secretary General Mark Rutte, speaking in Luxembourg, said Russia's growing missile capabilities are a direct threat to every member of the alliance. He added NATO is working day and night to counter GPS jamming that's been blamed on Moscow.
And this is exactly why NATO is stepping up when it comes to hybrid, cyber, etc. The threat from the Russians is increasing every day. Let's not be naive about it. This might also involve one day Luxembourg, my country, the Netherlands. We are all safe now. We think we are far away from Russia, but we are very close by. And the latest Russian missile technology, for example, the difference now between Lithuania on the front line and Luxembourg, The Hague or Madrid is 5 to 10 minutes.
As both sides claims new advances, the conflict continues to deepen tensions between Russia, Ukraine and the wider West, with no clear path yet toward a negotiated settlement.
And in economic news, World Trade Organization chief Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala warns rising tariffs are shaking up global markets. Trade under WTO rules has dropped to 72% from 80%, and she cautions it could fall even further, the biggest disruption to the trading system since the 1980s.
I think there's absolutely no doubt that we're experiencing the largest disruption to global trade rules, unprecedented in the past 80 years. So it's not surprising that some would question, the global trading system and its stability and predictability and all that, and even some call for, talk about demise and so on and so forth. Although I must share with you the demise of the WTO has been predicted many times since the 1980s.
White House trade advisor Peter Navarro has told the Supreme Court the fate of the U.S. economy is in its hands, calling the case the most important in history. Echoing President Trump, he warned that if a lower court ruling is upheld, it could spell the end of America's economic era.
Well, we already have, yeah. In fact, we're doing something else. We're going to be going to the Supreme Court, we think, tomorrow, because we need an early decision. I mean, look, the financial fabric of our country, we're a rich, incredible country right now, and we're able to, other countries use tariffs on us for years, and we never did. I did a lot during my first term, but then we had COVID, and we had to focus on other things. You couldn't be tariffing Italy, Spain, France, as they were dying by the thousands and millions. But we did with China, and China paid us billions and billions of dollars. And I started the process, but then I had to end it a little bit because of COVID. We focused on that.
And now the news in brief with Sofian Kanturi.
Fighting has flared up again in recent days between the Congolese army and M23 rebels, with intensified clashes across several fronts in North Kivu, eastern DR Congo. Local media reported Tuesday that the army accuses the rebels of deliberately burning homes, detaining young people including minors, and holding them illegally to use as human shields, sparking renewed armed confrontations. Afghan authorities said Tuesday the death toll from Sunday's earthquake in the country's southeast has risen to 1,411. The Red Crescent earlier confirmed that at least 3,251 injured and more than 8,000 homes destroyed in what is the deadliest quake to hit the region in years. Iran announced that its last 2 rounds of negotiations with the International Atomic Energy Agency have so far yielded no concrete results. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai stressed the need for European countries to act with honesty and responsibility, urging them to reconsider their positions without influence from the Zionist entity or the United States. Jordan Bardella, leader of France's far-right National Rally, confirmed that his party will not back the government in the confidence vote scheduled September 8. Speaking Tuesday after talks with Prime Minister François Bayrou, Bardella said the party's stance remained unchanged following the meeting.
And that's all for tonight's news. For the latest updates, follow us on our social media platforms. Thank you for tuning in and good night.